but at the same time, it's also going to be through appearances that people are going to wake up and say, hey, we're not alone. And not only are we not alone, but, hey, they must have some really interesting technology, and maybe there's more than one kind. And when you get into that, that's really, you start thinking about what is life in the universe all about.
Oh, definitely. I mean, just last night I had a strange experience. I had actually somebody sitting on my bed when nobody was there, and the covers went down, got tight, like a pressure was on it, and it was a benevolent presence. It kind of freaked me out at first, and I did my usual clearing work, and it was a benevolent presence, but I was so tired I just fell asleep. I don't know what happened after that, but it was quite interesting, and I'm beginning to see, as others here on the ranch are seeing, that there are all these beings just walking around right alongside of us, but they're just outside of our frequency, and we're not aware of them unless we've done our spiritual practices.
Right, and so I was going to say, you're not alone in that. Of course, many people have seen these lights coming into their rooms, and some of them are not what you would call like extraterrestrial vehicles. Some of them really can just be the being itself projecting. We feel, in a sense, we say that the being can be anywhere, it can be in any dimension, it can just send its thought forms into being with you. So even if people have experiences, say, for example, of Jesus, it doesn't mean Jesus left the heavens and came down and sat on your bed. It means his thought forms were able to materialize, literally, like we see in almost laser light energy, right into you, and all of that being can be there just as like the being can be somewhere else. So that's how we feel these higher beings, what we call whole light beings, actually materialize, that they're part of a greater ray of vibration, a ray of light that is able to just make its materialization.
Years ago, you told me that you had seen beings of light that looked very similar to those that I had composed in my film called Merkaba, Starseed, and I was curious, the more recent sightings that you've had of face forms, whoever faint or paraphysical, do they resemble those beautiful faces that you originally were reporting, or are they something different?
Yes, they do. There's the Orion Council of Light beings that have been coming in, and some of the Palladians have just electric blue eyes, beautiful beings that we've been seeing. Some beings have come, I don't even know where they're from, actually. I don't even have any reference points for them. But we've been seeing a lot of different beings. Even the, you might say, the veils between the nature spirits are coming down too, and we're seeing a lot of that activity here as well.
Well, when you were in Mexico recently for the conference of international speakers and researchers there, was there any report submitted by any of the worldwide experts that would match what you're seeing in recent times in your area of North America?
Actually, I was very close to it, but I didn't actually go to the event. I was down there getting some much-needed dental work done, so I have a great dentist down there that he was trained at USC, and I go down there because it's about one-third the price. But I was down there getting a lot of dental work done, and I was in Sayulita, and I thought it was interesting because everybody was saying that you were actually coming down there at that time to Sayulita, and I said,
well, I was on the program, but I had some situations that kept me over in Africa and that other part of the world. And again, I'm saying this to our radio audience around the world with the coming changes taking place with travel, airline travel, and just the cost of travel and all of the other situations that one cannot carry as many things as possible to distant places. There'll just be a handful of experts that will be able to go to these far-fetched, if I may use that expression, parts of the world, or the outback of Australia and the interior of Brazil and South Africa to catch up on what is really happening behind the scenes. So I was not able to make that event, and I know that you are highly thought of in Mexico, and that's simply why I just wanted to point out that we have seen in our recent work last year over Mexico major vehicles that divided into smaller pilot craft or what we call spectrum vehicles that were just of enormous size and velocity.
But the year before that, and one of the reasons we focus on Africa, especially South Africa, there was actually 3 separate sightings all within the period of a couple months. And these were multiple ships, one of which was interesting, very similar to what you were saying. There was a light that was appearing almost for 2 or 3 days in a particular type of telecommunications conference room. And this light appeared, and finally beings kind of materialized, and people were able to start catching these things on film. So it was very interesting that this whole building was starting to be kind of energized for some reason. Maybe there was something going on there we don't know about. But that was one of the events that took place in South Africa. So these things are happening all over the world. That's what's so exciting.
And the Keys of Enoch tell us in Key 309, vehicle squadrons stationed over important cities of the world will be seen motivating humanity to work out spiritual awareness and find answers to life. Global communication throughout the planet will be interrupted. The light workers will begin to use telethought communication. And this is a term that's very, very important because the work behind the scenes, for example, of Colonel Wendell Stevens and others, suggest that many of these other extraterrestrial cosmic cultures use telethoughts or high-speed mental communication. They do not use language as we use it, but they use a different type of sound structure to communicate, which means that behind all of this there is a language of communication working with the mass distribution of natural oscillations. And we can begin to work on this cosmic syntax, what I call LINCOS, L-I-N-C-O-S, to really make the connection for human and transhuman communication work, thus preparing large numbers of people not to be in fear, but to be in psychological, spiritual, and scientific preparation for what we feel will be a major change of great significance.
Have you checked into Adam's calendar there and the supposed home of Enki?
Right, we were out there in that area, and actually we personally didn't go that particular time, but we have an Academy for Future Science based in South Africa, and they've gone out there 2 or 3 times. And what's interesting is not only is Adam's calendar very, very interesting, which for your audience is a type of megalithic site, but also a round circle or round, what we call round numbers calculations for the stars in that area, maybe also with Orion, if you want to analyze it a little bit more. But there's probably about 100 littler places like that around that whole vicinity. So it's not, Adam's calendar is probably the largest and has the larger kind of megalithic stones that have this alignment, but there's others there too. Very, very fascinating. And of course, there's also the Zimbabwe ruins that's very similar. There's, we believe that life really was much more sophisticated, we'll say even 15,000, 35,000 years ago. You asked what we were doing. One of the things we had done last year was to go down to Chile, and they have an area called Monteverde, and they found people had lived down there in Chile perhaps 35,000 years ago. Quite a long time, much, of course, this is not in any kind of, textbook or anything like that. And in fact, the scientists are very, very concerned about trying to excavate this because they'll probably lose their Ph.D.s or their university affiliations. But
that's what they're saying. They'll be sandbagged or they'll lose their status, not their Ph.D.s, but their status of coming out of the closet and saying that we have evidence, tangible evidence, that there were sophisticated sociological organization going back 30 to 33,000 years ago in South America. So we have some very outstanding documentation that will be coming out in the future. But you need a scientific team. You need a credible audience. You need really to weigh the changes and have the opportunities to share with those who really want to see and understand information from a very positive viewpoint of a positive future that we're being prepared for with these vast discoveries of the past, as well as going into the future, showing that we are capable of tying the two ends together if we keep our sanity and our spirituality on a high level.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of people say, well, they're just going to beam me up on a ship. And I said, well, can you imagine the frequency of those ships and how intense that energy field would be? And do you really think you could handle that kind of an experience? And, I think a lot of people would just go bonkers if they were pulled up on some of these ships. And the frequencies alone would just bring up all their fears and unworthiness and guilt and sadness and wounds and traumas would probably just hit the surface, as soon as they entered those fields.
Exactly, and when people have experiences like you said you had the other night, oftentimes the energy from these beings is so overwhelming that people just want to, pull the covers over their heads. It's not a negative thing, but it's actually so much love, so much positive energy, so much, really just vibrance that we're not used to that type of thing. And it reminds me also, years ago in South Africa, we were friends with a woman named Elizabeth Clark, and she was a contactee. I will not say an abductee because it was all by her free will. And she was taken to another planet called